Welcome back to another Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating philosophical framework by a thinker named Zhu Shofeng. It maps out this radically different approach to finding inner peace, especially in our incredibly chaotic world. Seriously, if you've ever felt completely overwhelmed by the noise and pressure of daily life, this text offers a pretty mind-bending shift in how we actually view our own identity.
So here's exactly where we're headed today. First, we'll look at achieving the ultimate fruit. Then we're going to break down three core pillars: selflessness, unselfishness, and non-attachment. And finally, we'll map all of that onto what's called your spiritual coordinate system.
Okay, let's start with Section 1, achieving the ultimate fruit, which is really the end goal here.
So, what does reaching this ultimate destination actually look like in everyday life? Well, according to the text, reaching the quote-unquote ultimate fruit means you become completely unselfish and totally selfless. It's this wild paradox, right? Having nothing, yet possessing absolutely everything. You literally have no fear of death, and you perceive the world as perfectly 100% just. But here's the coolest part. All your daily activities just transform into spontaneous games. It allows you to associate with people through completely natural, easygoing, come-and-go relations.
Which brings us to our next section. Pillar 1, selflessness, or as I like to think of it, the game character.
To really grasp selflessness, the source poses this incredibly humbling question. Who am I? I mean, really think about it. We can't decide our own birth, we can't decide when we depart, we definitely can't fix yesterday's mistakes, and we can't magically grow an eye on the back of our head. We can't even stop ourselves from crying when we're chopping onions. So if we have so little control over our physical existence, where exactly is this, quote, self that we're clinging to so fiercely?
And that brings us to the author's actual definition of selflessness. The concept argues that there inherently is no self in the universe. Instead, we are basically like characters in a computer game, acting as manifestations of the greatest creator's consciousness. I absolutely love this video game designer metaphor. Think about it. When we believe in a self, we get deeply entangled. We get stressed, we get heartbroken over the game's plots and our little roles in it. But without that notion, we just transcend those roles. We simply play along with circumstances and destiny.
When you stack these two states up against each other, the difference is just profound. A world with the self is troubled. It's full of suffering, arguing, and scheming. In fact, the source argues that the ego is the absolute root of all worldly anxiety and conflict. It's the self that's desperately dancing on waves or sobbing in a prison cell. Conversely, in a world without self, paradise appears. When that illusion of the ego finally drops, all the conflict just drops right along with it.
Okay, moving right along to Pillar 2, unselfishness, dealing with the ownership illusion.
The author challenges us to kind of hover above and look down on the world for a second. Who really lives the hardest life out there? Who is the most troubled or the most insidious? Well, according to the source material, it's actually not the people with the least money. No, it is the people burdened with the heaviest selfishness.
There's this striking quote from the text: "Hell is overcrowded because people's selfishness is too heavy." Just let that sink in for a second. The text points out how a billionaire toiling day in and day out in the wind and rain is ultimately living an absurd reality. Why? Because you can't take the wealth with you. The whole idea of what is mine or yours is entirely fabricated. The text suggests that if working with selfless people feels like living in heaven, well, that's because heaven is literally composed of selfless people.
All right, on to Pillar 3, non-attachment, or just letting things be. Ask yourself this: who can turn a cabbage into a radish, or, a cat into a dog? It's kind of a funny mental image, but it perfectly illustrates a crucial point. It is completely impossible to force things to be what they inherently are not. Every single person has their own face, their own heart, and their own unique path. The text puts it this way: let those who love bread eat bread, and let those who love beer drink beer. The author is imparting that making other people act according to your own idea of what's right, well, that's the very definition of self-attachment. If you're constantly trying to correct others so they act exactly according to your intentions, you are just keeping yourself trapped. And this brilliantly shows the stark contrast between letting things be versus forcing your will on the world. Without attachment, you don't interfere. You don't force anything. You see everything as pleasing and you hear everything as reasonable. The result? A peaceful world and a highly satisfactory life. But with attachment, storms arise and chaos inevitably ensues. So how does this all tie together? Let's look at the synthesis, your spiritual coordinate system. This system maps out exactly how people interact based on what they deeply value. Here's how it breaks down. If you value interests, you're categorized as a worldly person. If you value feelings, you're immortal. Value logic, you're a virtuous person. And if you value spirituality, you are a celestial being. Now, the absolutely crucial takeaway here is that these four groups can never truly see eye to eye. Virtuous people and celestial beings are never going to fully agree, just like worldly people and mortals literally cannot truly understand each other.
To really drive this point home, the text uses this highly memorable metaphor, a hen trying to teach a phoenix how to fly. When a worldly person tries to correct a mortal, or a virtuous person tries to fix a celestial being, it's a fundamental mismatch. It's basically someone who is ignorant of the heights of the heavens and the depths of the earth, arrogantly attempting to correct someone on a completely different, higher tier.
Which leads us to our final big question. What is your coordinate system? Really, where do you honestly fall on this chart? By recognizing your own coordinates and the coordinates of the people around you, you can finally stop forcing the cabbage to be a radish. You can stop trying to teach the phoenix how to fly. So the next time you find yourself getting super frustrated by someone else's actions, just take a breath and ask yourself, are you caught up in the game, or are you just observing the players? Thanks so much for joining me today on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.